Good morning, everybody. Welcome into the Morning Glory Show. What's up, Titans Nation? Welcome into another Morning Glory Show. Joined by my wonderful co-host, as always, Jonathan Miller at Esports Valen. How you doing today, Jonathan?
Doing good, man. We're getting closer to the season. 2-0 in the preseason.
Undefeated
Undefeated
as of right
in
now.
2024. Feeling good. Yeah. Looking, forward to talking about this roster. There's a lot to talk about. A lot of names to consider. Some guys that I was really low on at the start of the offseason. Some guys that I was really high on that maybe aren't performing up to that standard. So got a little bit of everything, a little bit of a mixed bag. But yeah.
Yeah, if you guys didn't know, we're covering 53-man roster predictions today. We're going to hop into all of that and give out all of those predictions. And then we'll be comparing back and forth. B-Will couldn't make it today, but maybe he'll pop in here later. We'll see. But we're going to go ahead and kick things off with our signed jersey giveaway, of course. If you guys are checking us out for the first time, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. If you do, it enters you in for that signed Tajay Spears giveaway. It's the 32, so it's going to be a throwback jersey after this season with him switching up the number. And then we got merch now as well. Go check it out there on YouTube. We got the shirts. We got the cups. Check out the new logo. Looks beautiful. But we're going to kick things off today. And I'm going to start us. And we're going quarterbacks. And last week we talked on the show how we were wanting to see Malik Willis run with the twos. We were granted that wish. Unfortunately, he didn't do a whole lot with it. So for my initial prediction, I have it as Levis and Rudolph. I think it's always been that in the consensus from the coaching staff. But they gave him a shot, and this is if he can keep him on the practice squad, amazing. We'll see if anybody puts in that waiver claim for him. But do you say it any other way, Jonathan?
No. On my list, I have Will Levis and Rudolph as the two quarterbacks that make the initial 53. I think from the Seattle game, we all kind of saw what we assumed we were going to see. I would say we didn't see anything crazy. Now, I will say this. Not to be a Malik Willis apologizer, right, or apologist. But I do think that, I'm glad that Nick Holes, the coordinators had a presser a couple days ago. I think it was Monday. I'm glad that Nick Holes said this because I've been saying it for a while, and it was the case in this game to the start in some degree. The offensive line didn't do him any favors in that opening drive. I think he said, he kind of switched up his cadence a little bit, which caused one of the false starts. So one of the penalties you can say is on Malik, and obviously he missed some really big throws. The one that crosser to Nick Westbrook-Akina is probably the biggest one early in the game. That was just like, you can't miss that throw. But at the same time, the offensive line did not do him any favors. That was not the starting offensive line. That was the twos, and the twos did not look good. So that was a little disappointing. Yeah, we'll talk about him. That was a little disappointing. So again, not to be a Malik Willis apologist, but I don't think that performance was entirely on him. But what I will say is, from a completion standpoint, like he's working within the frame of the offense. Like he's doing it, right? He was over 70% completion percentage for that game. He had over 70% completion percentage in the first preseason game. Granted, he didn't throw a whole lot. So it's clear that he's improving. I think he deserves to be on the team in terms of like probably, on the practice squad where he can be activated as an emergency quarterback. And I think the Titans would want him there. And I think that's probably the plan. And who knows, like maybe he's shown enough to be a second quarterback for some other team that just doesn't like what they have. There's a good chance that he gets claimed, or there's a decent chance he gets claimed, but I think most likely he'll just end up on the practice squad. And I've been a guy who's been like, hey, I really need to see, I want to see more because I want him to be the second quarterback. And up until the Seattle game, I was pretty firm that I liked him over Rudolph. I don't love Mason Rudolph, but I do respect his poise as a veteran quarterback in the context of needing a second quarterback. You need a guy to come in and be able to put the ball where he needs to put it, orchestrate an offense to maybe not go above and beyond and be the reason why you win, but at least be able to will your team to a victory and not make mistakes. And there were just too many mistakes in Malik's game and that are persistent. Like it's a lot of the same type of things. And I don't know if the game is just too fast for him or what. But yeah, at this point, I'm sold that Mason is the second quarterback and that Malik, best case scenario, will be back on the practice squad.
And it's real unfortunate for Malik because he has that first quarter and doesn't put anything together. And then Rudolph comes in on that first drive and has that TD to NWI. And on that crosser to NWI that Willis threw, NWI did clip heels with the defender as he was hitting that crosser right before Willis makes that throw. But if you look at the end zone camera, I mean, it doesn't slow NWI at all. He doesn't even put up a hand. It wasn't in his realm. And I don't think that would have changed the play. As far as the structure, I do think NWI was probably the primary read there. But Mason Kinsey is streaking down the field, burned his guy by at least 5 yards. And Jaquan Jackson can't be covered in the preseason. The dude is just coming out and showing out. I mean, we'll talk about him here in a little bit too, but I think that is one of my roster locks at this point. So yeah, we'll see what Willis does. And if he gets picked up by anybody, I'll be cheering for him. I think he's a great guy.
Same.
He's amazing, but I just don't think at this point in time, the game has slowed down enough for him. And he is improving. Like you said, it probably went from light speed out there as a rookie. It's moving Mach 6 now. So it's slowing down for him. It's just not there yet. So let's go ahead and hop into the running backs. Who do you have the Titans keep in here? I mean, obviously Pollard and Spears are at the top, but then it gets real tricky.
It does. And so I based my 53 prediction off of what I think the Titans will do. And I struggled just a little bit. But I think with this position group, I stood firm on my position a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised if the third running back, or if there was even potentially a fourth running back kept. I wouldn't be surprised. They spoke really highly about Hassan Haskins in terms of what he can do on special teams.
He's a demon.
But I will tell you that in my multiverse of creating this 53, I end up keeping an extra player on the defense that I feel fills the need on special teams. So what I did was I actually only kept 3 running backs. And the third running back I kept was Julius Chestnut, because I feel like Julius Chestnut has played the best out of that committee of running backs. Jabari Small has had his moments where he's looked pretty good, but I think he's a player that they likely are able to keep on the practice squad. And also he's banged up. That doesn't help his case. Hassan Haskins is a good player, like just good, just okay. I don't really feel like Hassan is a better player than Julius Chestnut. Obviously, Julius offers, he doesn't really have, stylistically, he's not the same player as the other two. But I will say that Julius Chestnut, even though he's a little bit of a bruiser, a little bit of a bigger back, this guy can get out in space. I mean, he proved it. We saw a couple of screens this preseason. And not only that, we've seen him at a high level the past 3 or 4 preseasons, the past 3 preseasons. So Chestnut has been a household name for us and just hasn't been able to crack the 53. He's done it a couple times, or once, I think, a season or 2 ago. And he's looked really good. I'm just really impressed with him as a runner. I think that if you had a legitimate injury to Spears or Pollard, that Chestnut adds value in the run game, legitimately adds value. And so to me, that's more important than having a guy giving the nod to Haskins and saying, hey, because you're a good special teamer, we're going to give you a 53 roster spot. I don't think it's necessary. I also think you're going to be able to keep Haskins on the practice squad. I don't think he's going to get nabbed up. So I think you're able to do that pretty easily. Yeah, so that's why I went with 3. I've seen a lot of people keeping 4 running backs. I have some logic that I can explain later when we talk about the defense, where I carry that extra roster spot defensively for players that are maybe more promising, that will kind of add some legitimacy to why I think they would go in that direction versus keeping a running back special teamer. So yeah, I can explain that logic later, but yeah, I have 3 running backs and the third I'm keeping Chestnut.
So I agree with you in all of your logic, and I agree that the three, I do have them keeping Haskins though. And
Mm,
basically why is I think I agree. Julius Chestnut is 100% the better running back as of right now. And I don't think it's even primarily close.
yep.
But I don't see the realm of possibilities where he sees the field on game day without a Pollard or Spears injury. I do think
Right.
Haskin is definitely the better special teamer, so he would see snaps out there. I think as a game day, I think that would work. But if Pollard or Spears goes down and they're missing a week or two, I do think Julius Chestnut gets the nod and is promoted to the 53 to take that role. So I do think Haskins is a very good. He's very good in pass pro as well. So he
Mhm.
can offer some of that third down versatility. He does have very soft hands. I just don't think he's a very good runner, and he is removed a year from this as well from last year with the suspension and all that good stuff. So maybe he's still getting back into it. Maybe he's got that Calvin Ridley effect that he had last year with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Maybe he gets better. So I think Haskins might get the slight nod, but I could see this being a potential spot where they might add somebody after this primary waiver claim. I don't think it's a huge primary concern for them, but I think it is something that they might look at potentially bringing out somebody else after the cuts downs, and maybe there's a guy out there. But that leads us into the wide receiver discussion, and this is a very chalk one, I think, too. If you're keeping 6 or 7, I think the 6 is pretty set. The 7 is kind of where it gets a little squirrely, and that's
Mhm.
being DeAndre Hopkins, who by all accounts we believe is going to be out there week 1. Then Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Burks, by who all accounts we think is going to be out there by week 1. Obviously, he went down late yesterday.
I wish they
And
would
we
stop
haven't
reporting on these like small issues. I know they have to. It's the media. They got to do their job. But man, I'm so annoyed. Like he's probably fine. And it just gets
he
the
probably
fan base
is.
all riled up. Like, oh, see, here he goes. He's hurt again. It's like, bro, I don't know. So we'll see. Hopefully it's just one of those things where he landed awkwardly and just kind of limped it off. And also Jim Wyatt added important context too yesterday. He said that was the end of that practice period essentially. So there was backups came in and just kind of finished the drive and then they were done. So it didn't really make any sense for him to just try to like muster through it for a couple of plays. So yeah, hopefully it's just one of those things where you landed awkwardly, you're in a little pain, you had to just kind of
I think TD even added on to it and said that he wanted to go back in there, and then they made him go to the locker room. So hopefully it's nothing, but he's got to quit doing this at the end of practice. It's the second time this offseason now. And then it just leaves it all up in the air. We'll see if he's out there today. I believe they are practicing today.
Watching him feels like an episode of Dragon Ball Z from back in the day. Like the episode ends and it's just like a cliffhanger. Or maybe The Walking Dead is a better analogy here. But it's like watching Traylon Burks is like watching The Walking Dead. Every episode, at the end of every practice, you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? You have to wait till the next week to get, in this case, the next day. But yeah, man, wild.
He's just got that Mike Williams effect. If he goes up in the air, he can moss somebody. But when he comes back down to the earth, that's where it gets troublesome. And maybe it's just because he's got that big body that's a lot to bring down, similar to Mike Williams. So hopefully, by all accounts, he'll be out there today. And if not, maybe we still see him on Sunday, and he'll be good for week 1. I don't think it's a major concern. If it is an actual issue, I think it's going to be a short-term issue. Yeah. And then from there, obviously, roster pirate NWY is going to be out there. He is eternal. He will never go away. And then Jaquan Jackson, we talked about him just a little bit ago. That I think that is easily the number 6 spot right here. Yeah. And this is where I get a little squirrely. I do have him keep him 7. And I think that 7th spot is Mason Kinsey. I think he gets the nod. But at the same time, I think when this roster starts to churn again, I think he might be that 53rd spot that gets cut, unfortunately. And this put back on the practice squad. But we'll see how it plays out. I think Kyle Phillips is with the injury. It's unfortunate, but I think he's dead at this point. Do want to shout out Bryce Oliver. I think that is my primary target to get on the practice squad at this point in time with them keeping the 7th spot. I really like what I see out there, and man, he's got that mind meld with Malik Willis right now. And he just went for a long touchdown again yesterday at the end of practice, I believe. So I think he's still learning. I think he's very young. He's an undrafted free agent, of course. So I have him keeping 7. What about you, Jonathan?
So in a surprising turn of events for myself, I have them keeping 7, and I have them keeping the exact same 7 as you. So I have Mason Kinsey making the roster as the 7th. Now,
I love it.
Let me explain myself here a little bit. So first off, the first 6 that you mentioned, including Jaquan Jackson, before preseason, the first preseason game against the Niners, we were all kind of in agreement that there were 5 solidified spots. And it was like, do the Titans keep 6 or 7? Do they keep 7 potentially because they really like what they see out of the bunch that we're all considering, which was, all the back end guys, Kyle Phillips, Kinsey, Jaquan Jackson, KRS Jackson, Bryce Oliver, you could throw in there. Like all these guys were kind of in the same bucket. It was like, which one of these guys are going to stand out? And Jaquan Jackson, not only did he show out a little bit in the first game to show like, hey, he's a legitimate punt and kick return option, which we knew that being drafted from Tulane, he kind of did some of that in college, but he's shown out in the offense, like being a versatile piece where he's coming in and, shaking the shoes of some of the, the likes of like Devin Witherspoon, which is an elite cornerback for Seattle, coming out in that game and showing out and having some really, really just crisp and defined routes. Did not look like a rookie at all. And then for him to continue to show up in practice, then I think before that game, he had 2 massive, huge touchdown runs after catch in that last practice with Seattle as well. So for me, from that moment, I'm like, okay, like I was pretty sold on Jaquan from what we saw early on in camp. He just looked really good. He looked the part. But then for him to put it together week after week, practice after practice, game after game, it's really impressive. So, yeah, I think that the consensus on the fan base is that these 6 players, Jaquan is the 6th guy. But for me, I put this roster together and I got to 50 players very easily. Immediately, I got to 50 players. And then I found myself in those last 3 spots going, okay, they could really go any direction. And so what I did is I went, okay, if I'm the coaching staff and I have 3 spots left, I have to think strategically. 1, do I have a player that just really stood out, that just has just shined above all? And do I feel really confident that that player can add value to the team? And how do they do that? And then 2, it was like, is the factor of me getting a player stolen, does that matter? Brian Callahan kind of tipped his hand on how he feels about that in a presser a couple of days ago, where he said, look, we're not really worried about players getting stolen or hiding players. All teams have good players. They're going to have to worry about putting their practice squads together. It's highly unlikely. I think only 3 players were claimed by different teams after initial cuts last year. So for me, how I arrived at Kinsey as the 7th receiver and them keeping a 7th receiver, which to me is like mind-boggling. How I arrived there was, I feel like Mason, this has been his best offseason he's ever had with the Titans, right? So that's number 1. Number 2, it's clear that when Mason gets in there with some of those other players, with like the ones, for example, he shines. When Will Levis throws him the ball, when Mason Rudolph is throwing it, it doesn't matter who's throwing him the ball. He is showing that he can play at a high level. So Mason Kinsey kind of gives you what Kyle Phillips could give you. You got a very similar player in that way. But the difference is that Mason Kinsey is a better established special teamer than Kyle Phillips. If you
100%.
to me, you shouldn't, they might, but you shouldn't roll Tajay Spears out there on special teams with Jaquan Jackson, maybe let's say in kick return, because it's just too much of a risk. Like you don't want Spears to go down. He's too important of a rotational piece on the offensive side of the ball, in my opinion. So to me, not only does Kinsey give you versatility in the offense if he needs to see the field for some reason, but he also gives you versatility in the return and special teams. And not only that, the last thing I'll add about Mason Kinsey, and the reason why I think he deserves the nod in one of those last 3 the last 3 spots that I was deciding, is that it's very clear that Mason Kinsey is a locker room guy. Like a lot of people love him. He's got great energy. He's been with the team for a long time, so there's a lot of continuity there in the fan base. He just has impressed. He's straight up just earned his spot on the team. So to me, I would not be surprised if they only keep 6 at all. But also, I would not be surprised if Kinsey finally made the roster. So that's how I got there. And I think we're crazy, Jake. I honestly think that this team probably most likely keeps 6 receivers. But when I had those final 3 spots, it was just really fun to make that decision. And I made that decision based on what they might want to do on the special team side. Because one, I think Mason Kinsey is gritty enough to go out there and cover kicks as well if you need him to. 2, if Jaquan goes down, he can be your punt returner. He was our emergency punt returner last year and was basically the only guy who could catch the damn ball and return a punt at all. So you give yourself some depth on the special team side of the ball with him as well. So I think that he still sees the field. And so to me, all of those things considered, I think it makes sense.
I kind of go back to what Callie said earlier this week, and he's like, you know what? When we get down to those last couple spots, we're not going to look and say, hey, we need a 4th tight end. We need a 5th safety. Mm-hmm. We're going to go and find the best player out there when I add him to the roster. And I think Mason Kinsey has had that confidence this offseason. He's out there spinning balls. He's talking trash to the Seattle defenders. And then going back to Jaquan, I'm like, man, why were we so low? Or why was I so personally low on him coming into the draft? And I go back to the Senior Bowl because he had a lot of good plays in there. But then I go, who are the quarterbacks? And basically in the Senior Bowl, they had the two sides, and one side was loaded. They had Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and Spencer Radler. Mm-hmm. And then I'm pretty sure Jaquan Jackson had Michael Pratt, who I think is a good prospect. But then they had Joe Milton, Carter Bradley, Sam Hartman. Not a lot there. So I think that could have played into it a little bit. And, I mean, going into last week, and Stoney said in the comments, felt like Brian Callahan called Jaquan out last week. And then he came out and kind of showed out on Saturday, led the team in receptions and, I believe, yards, if I remember correctly. And he had the 2 catch and runs against Seattle in practice where he just took it to the house, long touchdowns. And hopefully he can continue that success going into Sunday. But as of right now, I think he is the punt returner. I think he's the primary kick returner. But probably going to put somebody else there back over with him, and it could be Mason Kinsey. We'll see how it is. As of right now, I still think it probably is Tajay Spears, and I think that's kind of what Colt Anderson is holding back. But we'll see. I think either way, the special teams unit might be the best unit on the entire team over defense and offense. I think having Stonehouse out there, I think the kicker situation, which we'll get to here in a little bit, I don't think we're going squirrely with that, but I think that's perfectly fine. And then I think these coverage units are very good. And then going back to Clowney Super Bowl in the comments, Haskins is in a great special teamer. Show me 3 great plays Haskins has ever made on special teams, and I bet you can't. I can go back to just Saturday and find you more than 3. I will tell you that.
I was about to say the coaching staff strongly disagrees with you, and that's because they're looking at tape, and that's because he showed up a lot. He's a good player. He's a damn good player. And to be honest with you, there's a good chance that they keep 4 running backs instead of 7 receivers.
And I've really played with it. And I was like, man, I could see that going that way. But ultimately, I don't think they see that as a priority.
It would just be priority. It would be a dead spot. I mean, to be honest with you, there's a good chance that they just keep Haskins as the 3rd running back because they might feel like he adds more value. But I will say, as we continue to move through these position groups, I have my reasons for going with Chestnut versus,
And we'll hop into that. And I think, if anything, we can both agree that the Titans will not cater to volunteer fans no longer. No. And Jabari Small will be gone. I think he had a great pass pro rep, and I think Stoney's the one that actually initially put it out. He did great on that play. I just don't think he's a great runner of the football, and I don't think he offers a whole lot more outside of that. But
yeah, pretty decent game against Seattle running, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's his best game yet. I mean, it's only 1 of 2. So, I mean, maybe he'll continue that this week.
He'll make it to the practice squad, I'm sure. They'll find a spot for him.
should. He should. We'll see if they keep the 3. I think they might only keep 1 on that practice squad. But let's go ahead and hop into tight ends, and we'll let you lead off this discussion. But I think the great question is: are they keeping 3 or 4?
Yeah, so I went back and forth on this group. I'm going to tell you what I would do, and then I'm going to tell you what the Titans are likely going to do. I think if it were me, I would keep 3 tight ends, and the third tight end would be David Martin Robinson.
Okay, I'm assuming Nick Vannett.
Over Nick Vannett, yeah. I just to me, DMR has shown the most promise in the tight end room out of all the players, mostly because we haven't seen a tremendous amount from Chig or Josh Wiley in terms of like game. I think those players have looked good in practice from what we've heard, but to me, DMR has stood out the most. He got insane praise from all of his coaches, basically, but Nick Holes spoke very, very highly of him, was very impressed. And I think he kind of adds a very similar style that the first 2 guys do. Now, in my prediction, I went ahead and added, I gave them 4 tight ends. I don't love that, but I think it's possible. And the 4th tight end was Nick Vannett. To me, I think they keep him just out of like experience and just like, hey, he's kind of like your inline blocking tight end, and maybe there's value there in certain packages, so you keep him on the 53. But to me, DMR is just a better player. And he's young. There's a lot of room for development. There's no way that they cut him. Like he just makes he's just good. And as a tight end 3, like it just makes too much sense. So for me, I would only keep 3. I would put that spot elsewhere, but I went ahead and gave them 4 tight ends in this case, assuming that they didn't just sign Nick Vannett. Like we just haven't seen a lot from Nick at all. So what's he just not going to play, practice very little or whatever? Maybe he's practicing a normal amount. He's just not going to play, and then they're just going to stick him in there and he's going to be tight end 3. Like, I don't know. I'm not convinced that that's a sold part. So I have them keeping 4. I don't love it, but I do love the 3 tight end, tandem of, or triple effect of DMR alongside Chig and Wiley.
So I see it pretty similar. I do have them keeping 4, and it is those 4. How I see it breaking down is it's almost 2 different positions. So you have your Y and you have your F.
Yep.
And I think Josh Wiley is traditional Y, and I think Nick Vannett backs him up there. Vannett's going to come in. He's going to be that Jeff Swaim. He's going to be that Trevon Wesco. Hopefully he's better than both of those players, but he's going to come in and offer that to you. And I think he's a better receiver than both of those guys as well. But that's not what you're bringing him in there for. And then Chig Okonkwo, of course, he's going to play that F position for you,
yep,
that flank position. And then I think DMR is the backup in that situation. And I think if any of those players goes down, those are the next coming up into those spots. DMR has impressed. He is very athletic, similar to Chig, and I think he's only going to continue to grow. And he's a great receiver, probably better hands than Okonkwo at this point in time even. So I'm super happy with this tight end group. And I think we're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets. I've been saying it all offseason, looking back at Cincy's game tape from last year. I think we're going to see a lot of Chig Okonkwo and DMR in the backfield even, and they're going to be there in pass pro snaps. DMR has also impressed me with his run blocking ability. That was something I was like, probably just a glorified big receiver. But looking at last week's tape, he had some great blocks. And I think he's still going to improve there for sure. And maybe he was a little underutilized in college. So I think this is a guy that you have to put on the active roster, because if you don't, I think he could be one of the primary ones that is picked up elsewhere.
Yep, agreed.
Going in to the offensive line, we'll start with the tackle position. This is one of my 2 probably biggest concerns on the roster, and I think it's very top heavy. So J.C. Latham and Nick MPF, those are your 2 starters, and I think that's a given at this point.
Yep.
But if one of those guys goes down, I mean, when Latham had that cramp issue, I think it was last week, maybe it was the week before last, I was freaking out, because that could have been a really big deal. Obviously, he's fine, but behind him, there's not a lot. I mean, John Ojukwu, I mean, that mania is long and gone. I I actually don't have them even keeping John on the
Oh,
53. I only have them keeping one additional tackle as of right now, and it's Jalen Duncan.
hmm.
Um, I think Bill Callahan has talked about it a couple times now that he really likes Jalen Duncan. Looking at last week's tape and the preseason thus far, I still see it and have a lot of concerns that I had going into the season. I think he is a great athlete. I think he has the strength and the ability to do it, but he seems very slow off the line for me. Once he drops into that set, I think he's athletic, but I don't know what it is. He's so slow out, and then I almost feel like he's playing catch up with that defender, and that's where he gets beat to the outside, where he just can't catch up to him, or he oversets and they beat him inside. And then I think his hands. I mean, he just doesn't have that stab that like a JC Latham has. He doesn't stonewall the defender there. So I think overall his technique is only going to continue. And if I'm looking at just pure upside, I like Jalen Duncan slightly more than Njoku. Obviously, maybe this is the place they go and grab a guy. Maybe it's Dennis Daly. I mean, he was just cut very recently. We'll see.
Oh, come on, bro.
No, so I don't think they'll do that. But man, at this point in time, I see this tackle group very similar to Dennis Daly, and maybe they stay healthy all year, and we don't have to worry about this. And God hoping, but we'll see how it plays out. How do you see it?
Yeah, so I actually elected to only keep 8 offensive linemen as well. So
Okay,
I don't know if you had 7 or 8, but I kept 8. And to be honest with you,
I actually have 9.
yeah, I could see them keeping 9, and I might be wrong. They might keep 9 because so basically I have 3 backups essentially, which seems a little light on the 53. So we'll see. I like that. I don't have Rupsich getting kept, and he's probably like not. He's probably 9. But here's who I have. I have the starting 5, who I've had as the starting 5 for a long time now. By the way, since camp started, Latham, Skoronski, Cushenberry, Radens, and NPF. Your starting 5, and then the 3 that I have that I'm keeping are I kept 2 tackles also. So I kept Duncan as well, and I kept Ajuku.
Okay,
And
I
I
thought you were
kept
going to say
him.
Brian Dooley, and I was about to freak out.
Lord have mercy, no. No, I kept
Brian
the
Dooley
Juku
is looking
because
good.
I think in practice and in camp, Ajuku has looked really good. He did not look good in the game against Seattle. I don't think that is a. I don't think I'm not going to condemn his play and all of the I guess upside that he's had in camp up until this point. I think he could probably be a swing tackle right along with Jalen. I don't know if you prefer Jalen at right or left. Probably at left because that's where he's gotten the most work.
Yeah.
So I think Ajuku getting able to plug in at right makes some sense. I don't know if he has any versatility, but I would imagine they probably want some guys who can plug in a couple areas, and that's where I have Brunskill rounding out the room. And Brunskill's probably the better of the offensive linemen that aren't starting because you truly can plug him in at guard or center.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, who knows? Like maybe Corey Levin's probably to the practice squad, so they can activate him if they have an injury there. But I think Brunskill bails you out in a lot of ways too. But yeah, I mean, 9 offensive linemen probably make the most sense. I squeezed a 7th receiver. I squeezed a 4th tight end. Like maybe one of those spots makes sense to carry an extra lineman. And if I had to carry an extra one, I'm probably leaning Rupsich. He did not impress me. He had a really, really rough Seattle game as well. He must be practicing better than that, but he looked pretty okay at right guard last season towards the end. But at this point, I think they're looking for better players. The one thing I will say is that there's 2 guys that we haven't gotten a chance to see a lot of, and they were both Bills guys who were signed. So there's Jaron Christian and Leroy Watson. We haven't seen much of anything from those guys. We saw Jaron. Was it Jaron or Leroy? One of those.
I don't think played.
Okay, so Jaron came out, had a really awesome pancake block on a play that we lost yardage on, and he celebrated like we scored a touchdown. So that was kind of funny. But other than that, excuse me. Other than that, we haven't seen a whole lot from them. So I don't know if one of those guys maybe gets the Bill Callahan nod to make the roster just because they feel like he's,
they're his guys.
Yeah, they're his guys. So who knows? Like maybe it's not Duncan, which I mean, I think Duncan and Njoku are those guys, but maybe Jaron Christian is one of those guys. Maybe Leroy squeezes in. I'm not sure. But I think, I followed my gut on this one. I went with 8 offensive linemen. I can see them keeping 9 and having Rupsich be that guy because they maybe need another interior. I would assume you want at least 2 interior backups and 2 tackle backups on the active roster. Because what happens if both tackles go down or whatever? Like, those are totally possible things. So I think they probably keep 9. I'm probably wrong on those other areas where I added some extra players, but yeah, I think we see it about the same.
So yeah, obviously Skoronski and Radens, I don't think we brought them up, and then Cushenberry. Those are your 3 starters on the interior. I have Daniel Brunskill labeled as that replacement center if anything happened to him. But as far as the guard position goes, I have Andrew Rupsich being that pretty much swing guard for you. He'll be able to fill in at both spots as of right now. Cole Spencer, they paid the man. I mean, highest undrafted free agent money that we shelled out this year. And he looked great both weeks. And I think he's improving. And he's got the intangibles, I think, but he's also got the athleticism. He's got a very good RAS score. Obviously, he went from Western Kentucky. Not a lot of eyes out there. He transferred to Texas Tech that last season. Played very well for them as well. But that system doesn't really put a lot on tape for NFL standards. So I think this is a Bill Callahan chosen guy that I think that will stick out there, and I think could hop in and spot start potentially this season. But I think down the road, I think this is a developmental guy that'll be very good for you. And then just one guy that I was very close to putting on the roster is Latavius Simmons. Great O-line, just aesthetic. He's got the dreads. He's big. He moves people around. He played very well this offseason, and I think he could have potential to make it on this roster. But at the end of the day, I had to find somewhere else to put these spots. I had them, unfortunately, cutting him. And then we talked about him a little bit, but Brian Dooley, I think, played very well in both preseason games thus far. If we talked about last week how we wanted to see Malik Willis get some runs with the 2s, I want to see Brian Dooley get some run with the 2s just to see if there's anything there. The athleticism might not be great. He does have the size. He's got long arms. Maybe there's something there. Maybe I'm wrong. But I want to at least see it before the end of this preseason. And then leading into Corey Levin, the poor dude has been on this roster so many times and just unfortunately cut so many times and brought back. So I don't think it's a guy you have to worry about getting picked up anywhere else. I think this is a guy you can call off of the street if we absolutely have to. It's very unfortunate for him, but
the Jets did it one year. They took him.
Yeah, they did.
Right.
There's one of the times we need him. So yeah, we'll see how that all plays out. And then I think that kind of wraps it up for the offense, which leads us into this edge group, I think. And this is the spot. This is my biggest concern as of right now, because it is Landry, Key, and Harrell, and then question mark.
Mm-hmm.
On my roster, I have them keeping 4, with that 4th being Rashad Weaver. I'm not falling into the Mike Herndon, Buck Rising sweepstakes that Caleb Murphy is making this roster. I think Rashad Weaver is just a little bit more proven, but I think that this is where that priority waiver claim is going. I think they're adding somebody, and I don't think we're going to have to see Weaver out there in a jersey this season. And then guys like Shane Ray, just he can't do it. He's older now. There's not a lot of upside. I don't see the point of having him on the active roster at this point in time. But yeah, I think after the initial cuts, this is where they probably look. How do you see it?
Yeah, so I'm in the same boat. I actually have them keeping Shane Ray. So I have them keeping 5 outside linebackers. I think it's also very possible that they could use a waiver claim or just look to maybe see some of the cuts and add a 5th. They just need a 5th guy who can add some value, because right now, to your point, Jalen Harrell is at the top of that rotation, and you're going to need more depth there. I do have them keeping Rashad Weaver. I think that if he's going to have a better season, maybe come close to that 5-sack year he had early on in his career, I think it'll probably be this year. Like he'll need to come out there and add some value. But yeah, this is the position group that I'm the most worried about as well. Not at the top of the depth chart, at the back end of the depth chart. So I could see them only keeping 4. To me, you probably need a 5th for this type of, because it's and here's the thing. The reason why I could see 4, and I wouldn't be surprised if they kept 4, is because this defense is going to look pretty exotic when it comes to putting guys in the box from the back end. So they might assign an extra roster spot to the safeties or to the inside linebackers or whatever. They're going to assign some extra roster spots on the back end because guys like Jamal Adams are going to move up. Guys like Elijah Molden are going to move up. Guys like, Diggs, even Hooker, like they're going to play closer to the line of scrimmage at times. So, are you okay with just 2 outside linebackers in a thin rotation for that reason? Potentially. Can they add a guy? Does maybe I don't think Hassan Reddick at this point makes sense for them. Plus, I don't know if the Jets are even interested in sending him. But outside of that player, like signing in a Yannick Ngakoue or somebody, like I would maybe like that to add to the rotation. You pair him and maybe Weaver is on the back end, and then you have Ngakoue and Harrell splitting the rotational reps. That might make more sense to me. So there's a couple of guys out there that could make sense, and I think this is the position group that makes the most sense that they would go out and potentially add somebody. So I have Shane Ray, but I think what's really important to me is that's just as of today. I think they keep 5 outside linebackers, and there's just a good chance that 5th guy, we don't know who that is yet.
Yeah. That's kind of how I see it as well. I think there will be somebody that's cut that they can definitely bring in. And I mean, God, I hate that they got rid of Travis Gibson from last season, because I think he would have fit very well with this defense, I think.
Yep, I agree.
But yeah, I ultimately went a different direction to where they could keep additional players on this back end. But we'll see how it all plays out. And then next we'll hop into the interior defensive line. Do you want to start that one off for us?
Yeah, so I grouped the defensive line together on my roster. So I have all the basically interior defensive linemen essentially. And interior and the defensive linemen. Yeah. I kept 5. And I think there's a chance that they could maybe keep 6, but I think 5 probably makes the most sense here. And my 5 I feel really good about. The 5th guy really impressed me in the Seattle game. He's looked good in practice. I think that he makes a ton of sense here. So my 5, I'll just run through them. I got Simmons and Sweat, obviously, Sebastian Joseph Day, and then I have Keandre Coburn, which to me has solidified himself as like the primary backup, in my opinion. And then the last guy, I might butcher his last name a little bit because I don't know how it's pronounced, but I have Isaiah Iten or Itten.
There you go.
He was fantastic in the Seattle game. Has looked pretty good in practice too, from what I've heard, but I was very, very impressed with how this guy penetrated. He did a really great job in the run game. Was just good. Like there was just some good, like complementary pass rushing happening on the defensive line that, you got a little bit of push from Weaver. You got some pressure from Weaver on the outside. You got some pressure from, Jalen on the other side. And then it was just good pressure on the middle that collapsed a pocket several times for Sam Howell and PJ Walker. So yeah, I have those 5 and I feel pretty good about those 5, to be completely honest with you. I was surprised when I looked at that roster and was like, okay, all right, I think we're okay here. Obviously Marlon Davidson goes down, some injuries happening there. TK McClendon, not sure that he showed more that he needed to in order to make the roster. So wasn't super high on McClendon. I think they just keep him on the P squad and he'll make it to the active roster at some point, I'm sure, because injuries are going to happen. But those are my 5.
Well, TK just went down with turf toe this week, I believe. So he's currently injured. I think I would probably keep TK over Isaiah Iten. But with that, and that comes down to just because I saw the flashes last season, and I know TD was very high on him when we came on the podcast earlier this year. So, and then Marlon Davidson went down, I believe is done for the season, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Yep. So I do have him keeping 5, and it's the same exact 5. Cool. As bad as I feel about the edge group, I feel very good about the interior. And maybe we just roll out 4 of those big boys out there and just let everybody else blitz off the edge. I mean, could you imagine a Jeffrey Simmons sweat and Coburn out there. That's like almost 1,000 pounds of beef out there, just eating up the interior. But I think there's great depth here. I think there's great upside. Probably the best player on the team is part of this position. So I think this one's pretty standard. I didn't have Iden on my initial one when I put out. I didn't put it out yesterday, but I said Iden Mania is done. I just couldn't do it. I had Shane Ray this morning on the roster, and I was like, can't do it. Got to put Isaiah in there. So I swapped those two for us.
Nice.
And then that kind of leads us into the inside linebacker positions. And going back to Stoney's question in the comments, who is the preseason MVP? James Williams, DMR, can make a strong case for Cole Spencer. I think the preseason MVP has got to be Chance Campbell, just from a stat padding perspective. But I don't have them keeping him. I have us only keeping 5 inside linebackers, and that's Kenneth Murray, my guy, Jack Gibbons, and then James Williams and Gray, of course. Gray, that one is kind of special because he could end up on the pup, and then if that does happen, I think Chance Campbell is that next guy up. But I think this coaching staff likes Otis Reese more. And watching the game back from this last week, I think Otis Reese had a better game. Stats-wise, it wasn't there. But I think being in the right place at the right time, I think he offers more to this squad. So I only have him keep at 5, and I know that might not be the consensus. I think most people are having 6, and I'm assuming you probably have 6 on yours. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, that's really surprising. I think Chance Campbell has definitely shown enough to where he should be a rotational piece in this defense. But yeah, I think, kind of tried to put myself in the mind of Denard Wilson a little bit and think, okay, like what type of Denard Wilson linebacker fits that mold? And Chance Campbell fits that mold to me. To me, the top 3 linebackers on this team currently are Kenneth Murray, Otis Reese, and Chance Campbell. Those are the 3 guys. Those are the 3 guys that should see the most time. Now, where I struggled, let me just say, I kept 6. I kept all 6 of the guys that you mentioned, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the 6th player I kept was Cedric Gray. Now, I'm with you. There's a good chance that they find a way to maybe finagle him onto the pup or something and then scoop a player at a different position or whatever. They're obviously going to try to keep him. He was their 4th-round pick.
Yep.
Has a lot of promise, just hasn't been able to show him. So do you just cut him outright? Or do you find a way to keep him on the roster so that way you can finesse that? And I think they do. I think they use one of these spots to do that, which is why I kept 6 linebackers. I don't think they should necessarily carry 6 inside linebackers, though. The number needs to be 4 or 5, in my opinion. So Gibbons, I gave him the grace because I think that the coaching staff has to value how smart he is. I think he's a good player in some regard. I think he's instinctive in terms of the run game, but he is an absolute liability in pass coverage. Like he can't do it. He's bad. Even in the preseason, he's bad. Yep. He looked awful in that opening drive against the Niners. If it's me, I'm keeping 5 and Gibbons is the guy out. Like I'm just, nope, not doing it. But again, did my predictions based on what I think the coaching staff does. And I think Gibbons is good enough to be a rotational piece, at least in these coaches' eyes. But to be honest with you, I don't think he should have an active roster spot. I think he should be a practice squad player. So yeah, I ended up keeping 6 for that reason. Now let me stop really quick and give flowers to a player that I was not high on at all, but he absolutely has impressed in a huge way, and that's James Williams.
Oh, yeah.
So I gotta stop. I gotta give Jake his credit. Jake's been pounding the table for James Williams since he was drafted. I was like, no way, this guy makes the 53. He's a practice squad player all day long. I liked him. I just think that he needed time to develop. My thing is that when you're switching that position, like it's not super easy to do in the NFL. But he has shown that he has the instinctive traits to see ball, get ball, and he is an absolute specimen of a human being. So he's been very impressive in that regard, and I think that he has really high upside. I'm going to say something kind of like off the wall here, but when I look at him, I see like for just from like a silhouette standpoint, obviously he doesn't have the same length of pads, but I see like a young Keith Bullock in just like his aura. You know what I'm saying? And I don't really know how I can like prove that that's the case or like why that makes sense, but it just makes sense to me. He has the look. And so to me, he's worth not losing. So he, to
100%.
me, is a lock for the 53, whether he's linebacker 4 or 5 or whatever. That makes sense. I mean, I think you tear him loose. And so the last thing I'll say here is that the reason why I didn't keep Haskins or the reason why I didn't keep four running backs or whatever is because you have 6 linebackers. So you're able to fill out that special teams with instinctive, ball getters, So, so I think that's why in this multiverse, it makes sense for them. Like you can cover the special teams with these extra backers. But yeah, again, wouldn't be surprised if they only kept 5. But today, that's how I see it.
No, James Williams, absolute spider monkey out there on special teams last week.
Literal spider monkey. That one rep on.
I think Mike Herndon posted it where
he grabs a guy like he's consuming him, like he's a symbiote and he's going to eat him.
No, I've loved James Williams from the start. I had him higher ranked than Cedric Gray. I think he will be a starter on this roster before the end of his career. I think he's still learning the position. He was a former safety, moved there at the Senior Bowl, and has only been there for 6 months. He's still learning. And I think he's going to put it together. But he's great in coverage. He's a very sure tackler. He has the athleticism to shoot those gaps, and I think he'll put it all together. I think he has the highest upside out of this group for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of leads us to the cornerback group. And this is maybe the sexiest and the least sexiest for my positional groups. I think I started linebackers. So let's go ahead and have you start with the corners, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So for the corners, I only kept 5.
Okay.
This one was a little tough. I thought that there's a chance they can keep 6, and the 5th corner was a really difficult choice for me. So let me start by just highlighting the most obvious of obvious, which is the top 4. I think the consensus is the top 4, which is L'Jarius Sneed, Cheeto Awuzie, Roger McCreary, and Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I think Jarvis has proven that and earned that 4th spot. He should see legitimate reps during the season in rotation, whether that's at nickel or if he's playing on the outside. I think he plays on the out or should play on the outside, but I think you can move him around. I think, and I'll explain why I kept 5 as corners as well, because I think they keep an extra safety that can play corner. If that, kind of giving a little bit of a spoiler alert there. But the 5th corner, I ended up keeping who I decided on. I went with Gabe Jeudy-Lally as the 5th corner. And the reason why, and I'll explain why. So over like Eric Garrer or Trey Avery or somebody like that, Trey Avery doesn't belong on anyone's football team. But I went with Gabe Jeudy-Lally because he's young. He has that same type of sticky, instinctive, aggressive play style that I think Denard Wilson likes in his corners. And he is, kind of fits the mold and scheme of what they're trying to do a little bit better. So to me, I think Jeudy-Lally has a higher upside than some of the other players that might be. Like Eric Garrer is probably a better player right now, like in my opinion. Trey Avery, I can't imagine anybody would label him as a better player, but like it wouldn't be entirely surprising if he was the last corner. The other player, Caleb Farley. What about Caleb? I think they might try to do like a similar thing that you talked about where they try to finesse him onto the pup or something like that. I don't really know. Even if he is healthy, have you seen enough from him? Maybe they have. Maybe they have to keep him as the 5th guy. So I wouldn't be surprised there. But today, if I was deciding today, it pains me because I love Caleb Farley and I want him to pan out so badly. And I think he'd be great special teamer, all these other things. I just haven't seen. It's like the Malik Willis stuff. It's like we're just seeing a lot of the same stuff. So I don't know. If he's healthy, he's probably the 5th guy. But right now, I don't think he's healthy. So who knows?
I think, man, before I hop into mine, I just thought of this question. So obviously these top 4 are cemented in stone.
Yep.
But let's say obviously they've dealt with injuries with the Jerry Sneed and Cheeto. If one of those guys goes down, do you think Jarvis Brownlee is the replacement on the outside there, or do you think they bump? Okay,
Yep,
so
100%.
I think they bump Roger McCreary to the outside, and I think Jarvis comes into the slot.
Interesting.
So that's kind of how I see it. Both of these guys played outside corner in college. It's what they did very well.
I mean, Roger was forced to the outside because of how bad our cornerback room was, and he did a pretty good job. So
he did.
Yeah.
Played more snaps than anybody else in the NFL as a rookie. So he definitely got the experience there. So hopping into mine, I have us keeping 6. And this goes back to me saying this is sexy because of those top 4. And then it gets real gross. If this was me making this roster, I would agree in 2 things. One, Trey Avery doesn't belong on a NFL roster, and Gabe Jeudy-Lally has more upside and should make it. For some reason, this coaching staff is infatuated with Trey Avery, so I have them keeping Trey Avery as the 5th, and I have them keeping Eric Garror as the 6th.
Interesting.
So I think Eric offers a little bit more on special teams.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't agree with it. Like I said, if this was me, I'd probably be keeping 5 here, just like you, and it would be that same exact 5 that they said. But I think Garror offers a little bit more as a slot defender as well on special teams, and he can even be a return man for you. And the Trey Avery, I don't get it, but they like him, and he could be that one of those backups on the outside behind even Jarvis Brownlee Jr.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not convinced that they love him either. I think we've seen a lot of them in this offseason because they were trying to convince themselves that they want to love him. So they're like, here, let's just give him an opportunity to show us. And every time he gets toasted, he's getting toasted in practice by our practice squad receivers. He got toasted against the Seattle. He got toasted in the 49ers. And who was that player? It's like their wide receiver 6 or 7. I don't know. I don't remember his name, but absolutely put him in a blender. So yeah, at every juncture, he's not just getting beat by 1s and 2s and 3s, which by the way, we've watched happen to him over the past several years, because for whatever reason, he's good enough to keep the roster. This year, he's not. There is more talent at corner that they need to keep. And by the way, who's claiming Trey Avery? Not a soul. So he can make his way right over to the practice squad, and he can put his hoodie on during game day, and he can even hang out on the sideline. He can even do his thing, whatever. I'm not saying he's a horrible player, but what I am saying is that he consistently loses reps. Yep. And if you're consistently bad at your job, you shouldn't get to keep that job. That's just my opinion. So I think that, Trey, they don't need to go with him. Gabe Jeudy-Lally has shown them enough promise and an aggressive play style. Like early on was really good. Gabe didn't have really great reps either. Like in not only in practice, but in some of these games, I think he's gotten a chance to play. He hasn't been great, but also he hasn't gotten burnt for massive, you know what I'm saying? Like that's when you stand out. It's like the offensive lineman thing. Like if we're not talking about you, that's a good thing. So that's kind of how I feel there. But yeah, I agree with you. The only thing that I think is an outlier here is how they feel about Caleb Farley, because Caleb, when he's been healthy, he's flashed in camp. Like he's had some really good reps. He's length. He's got great length. He's got great speed. Obviously, I think he's improved in coverage in that way. So who knows? Like maybe they're like, it's not worth potentially losing him. But at the same time, do you lose him? He's been so hurt. I don't know if anybody else is going to use a 53 claim on him. So at the same time, you might be able to get him on practice squad, in which case, great. So yeah, that one's a little tricky.
Yeah, I think the Caleb Farley experiment is probably done after this week. I hope he can put it together this week and put a great set of practices on tape, and then I hope he plays very well in the preseason game, and then maybe somebody does claim him, because I think just him with Malik Willis, I think they're two amazing people. I think they're great people. I think one just struggles with his play and the other one just struggles with his health. So I hoping nothing but the best for him, and we'll see how it all plays out. Agreed. And that kind of leads us to our last position, which would be the safety group. And again, the top 4 cut in stone. They just brought in 2 teammates from Seattle that are going to be out there. And then you got Molden and Hooker. So you got Elijah Molden, Amani Hooker, and then we got Diggs and then Jamal Adams. I have us keeping 5.
I do too, and we have the same player. I know we do.
I'm sure we do. So I've talked about him for a couple of weeks now that he has impressed this year. Wasn't high on our radar coming into the season for sure, but that is Matthew Jackson.
Yep.
And he's played very well this training camp and then even back into mini camp. He's picked off Will Levis, I believe, 3 or 4 times at this point in time. I think he had another one over maybe Geno. I think it was Sam Howell, actually, now that I remember correctly. But I think he's played very well. He's shown to be great in coverage. I think he wants to have that dog in him, and I saw it not in the Seattle game, but that first game. He came off a blitz with James Williams and absolutely wrecked the running back to allow James to come free. So I think Matthew Jackson really fits into what Denard Wilson wants to do. I think he's a safety that he wants out there. I think he's just a great depth piece, and I think we'll see him out there on special teams too. So I think we're in agreement with this fit.
Yeah, the safeties, there's obviously with the 2 additions of Jamal Adams and Quandre, it gives this room some much needed strength at depth there, because obviously before those signings we're like, all right, we're rolling Elijah Molden and Amani Hooker out there, which was pretty impressed with Elijah Molden at the start of the Seattle game. He had 2 really strong opening drives against some good players. So I felt like Elijah Molden really stood out to me. He was really instinctive, was in basically every tackle in the run game. And I think he's been good in coverage as well. So really happy with the depth. I feel the same way about the safeties that I feel about the defensive line, let's say, where I feel really good about those 5. Rolling them out there and having good depth. Like if one of those guys goes down, I feel really confident Elijah Molden can come in. And even if it had to be Matt Jackson, feel pretty good about him. I think he's been a very good player. And so if you needed to see him for whatever reason, I think you have really good depth in those positions. So yeah, I feel the same way. And so again, like keeping 5 safeties, having 5 corners, I felt like you have some versatility there because Elijah Molden can play the nickel. Like he can play the hell out of that spot. So if you need him to come in a pinch, he certainly can do that as well, which is nice. And then Quandre Diggs also has that versatility of playing in on the line as well. So yeah, I feel really good about the secondary going into the season. If this is the 53, they have a couple of positions that, are kind of up in the air that they need to address, similar to like, let's just say the edge guys. But yeah, feel pretty confident that this is going to be the roster in many ways.
I think we're going to see a lot of 3 safety looks this year. And that's going to be with Quandre, Jamal, and Amani out there. And I think Molden could come in and be that big nickel, like you were saying. So I'm pretty confident in this group. I think health could be a big concern for them. And it's definitely an older group, but I think they'll be very successful. And I feel a lot better about it now than I did even several weeks ago when it was just Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden. That was it. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then I guess we can end with the special teams. I think it's pretty chalk of, Stonehouse is going to be out there, which we'll get to see him kick this week is what we heard. And then they'll also be holding for I'm assuming Nick Folk. And then Bo Brinkley will be your long snapper. And that's my 53.
Bo Brinkley, you mean Morgan Cox?
Yes, Morgan Cox, way back in my brain.
I was like, wow, what a throwback.
Yeah. God, he was there for so long, and it's cemented in my brain that it's Bo Brinkley still. And I guess we can have a brief discussion on the Braden Narvison situation. Personally, and I put it out there on Twitter earlier this week, if it was up to me, I would keep Braden over Nick Folk. Nick Folk is a better kicker. I think he holds the record for consecutive field goals under 40 yards at this point in time, and he's continuing to set that still. But how I view this team, and I'm sure we can talk about our final predictions next week or the week after that before the season starts, but I don't see this team as a Super Bowl contender as of right now. Shocking. to Titans fans, and I apologize. I promise I am a Titans fan, but I don't think they're going to be in the contention for that AFC championship this year. But I think Nick Folk is on a rental at this point in time. I think year to year, he could retire after this season potentially. His contract, I believe, is also up after this season. So
Yep.
Once this team becomes a contender, which I think they will, I don't know if Nick Foles is still around. So I would rather roll the dice on the rookie, similar to what Stonehouse did for us with Brett Kern at the end of his career, that maybe we can give this kid a shot. He's obviously got the leg, similar to Stonehouse, and maybe he has it. I mean, his collegiate career was not amazing, but maybe he'll put it together in the NFL. And I think he's got ice in his veins, as we saw last week. So I'm rolling the dice, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and we can move on next season and just move on like the Titans have done the last decade at this point. It seems like we just rent kickers, and if they don't work out, we get rid of them and bring in – we'll get Fat Randy back in here if we have to.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. I think if it were me, I'd be keeping Narveson. I think I'm a really big proponent of, like, obviously when it comes to kicking, like, you want somebody who, like, it's almost more of a mental attribute than it is a physical one, right? Like for Nick Folk, he's been in the biggest games, played, ice in his veins. He's nailed some insane kicks, and also he's really good for us last year. Yep. So it's hard to be like, yeah, let's just move on from that. And so at the same time, you're like, I think we're all in understanding, like, this is probably Nick Folk's last season. Like, he's probably going to retire after this. I was surprised he came back, if I'm being completely honest with you. I thought he was done. I thought he was either going to go try to play somewhere else, or he was just going to retire. Nick Folk does not have more than 1 year, in my opinion, in him. Like, let's say the Titans finish like really promising, like they make it to the playoffs, they beat a really big team, and they lose in the divisional round or something to like the Chiefs or something, and people are like, holy shit, like the Titans are doing it. Then I could maybe see him like, okay, hold on, I'll come back for one more. But other than that scenario, he's going to be done. So I'm with you. To me, it just makes sense. Like, get younger at the position. You have Colt Anderson, who has been nothing short of a really, really good special teams coach since he's joined us. And I think it's an opportunity for him to develop a young kicker, the same as we're doing with our quarterback and several other positions. So it makes sense. And like you said, like, you know, at the very least in the first half of the season, we're not expecting to be, you know, a Super Bowl contending team. So it makes sense to kind of get him in there. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. There's a good chance he doesn't get claimed and he makes it to the practice squad, in which case we're good. We'll be in the position that we need to be if there's a, you know, injury, or let's say if Nick Folk continues to kick like the one kick that he's made this preseason. I think was at this. I think what was it at the start of
week one?
Niners. Yeah, like he just looked like he shanked that. So that was kind of but
that came down to the holder at there too. Looking back at the tape, it wasn't his fault.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, Nick is great, and I think it makes sense for them to keep him. But yeah, I would love to see Narveson back on the practice squad because he looked good.
Yeah, I'm total agreement. But yeah, I think they will keep Nick Folk, and I think Brian Callahan has said that this job is not up for debate. And Easton Freeze, friend of the show, he kind of came out after the game last week and was like, yeah, I don't know how much of a competition it is. Braden hasn't been amazing in practice by any means. So maybe he's a gamer. Maybe he's a gamer, and that's all you need. But we'll see. But we'll be back next week. We'll be talking more Titans. We'll be recapping the Saints game. Obviously, the Saints play on Sunday in New Orleans.
And the 53.
And the 53 man will be announced before then. That's why we had to do it to this week, because it'll be out before we show back up. So we'll react into that. And then we're getting ready for the regular season, baby. It is almost here. We'll have college football this Saturday. I don't know about y'all, but I'll be watching Florida State versus Georgia Tech. I don't know what I'll be watching out there, but college football is back as well. So it's right around the corner, guys. But
smells like fall. Smells like fall.
Pumpkin spice lattes came out today. I can confirm I got the notification yesterday. So I am ready for it.
Tennessee's been acting like it's fall. The weather here has been nutty.
Not in Oklahoma, I'll tell you all that. It's still triple digits. We had a little overcast yesterday, but it's hot. It's hot. But we will check you guys next week. We love you, Mina. If you checked us out for the first time, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You subscribe, you enter that Tajay Spears signed jersey giveaway. We'll be giving that away as soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers. We're closing in under 150. I know that. But we'll check y'all later. Check out the new intro. Peace.